a choice right now, between fear and love. It's just a rock.
Out of the dark night of ignorance and into the shining light of truth.
Expanding reality.
A population of citizens capable of critical thinking.
We don't see things as they are, we see them as we are.
There's a level of reality where everything dissolves into an ocean of energy.
We empower our experience by insisting on our authenticity.
That's very profound. Very.
Expanding reality.
Welcome to Expanding Reality. We have a very special one for you guys today. We have Jim Penniston. He wrote an incredible book called The Rendlesham Enigma, and he wrote this amazing, over 700-page comprehensive breakdown of the timeline of the Rendlesham Forest event in Suffolk County there in England back on December 26th of 1980 because he was there. He knows all about it. It's one of the best and most comprehensive reportings to date, and so to have him here is a bucket list conversation for me personally. So this is a fascinating breakdown, guys. If you've never heard of the Rendlesham case, then you're getting a special treat here with being able to hear it from Jim himself. But also we talk about several questions and bring up several things that have never been brought up in any other interview. So we actually get a really, really comprehensive conversation out of this. So all the ways to find Jim and his wonderful book, The Rendlesham Enigma, will be linked down in the show notes. If you'd like to expand your experience with us here on the show, you can do so at expandingrealitypodcast.com. That is linked down in the show notes as well. That's kind of where everything is, Rockfin merchandise. If you want to get yourself some dope threads, go over there to do that. And also, it's got all the socials and stuff like that. So anyway, I'm just super excited about this conversation, guys. This was one for the books for sure. So without any further ado, let's get right to this damn thing with Jim Penniston. All right, ladies and gentlemen, a very, very special episode today. We have the one and only Jim Penniston here from the Rendlesham Forest event that took place December 26th and 28th, but you were part of the 26th of 1980 over there in England in the Rendlesham Forest, and I am so excited to speak with you, my friend. So before we launch into your incredible story, if you don't mind, for my audience, just give a little bit of background about yourself.
Okay. Background about myself. Well, my military background, would that be enough?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah, I entered the Air Force in 1973. Had a few assignments, throughout the United States. One of the special ones I had was with the SAC Elite Guard at Omaha, Nebraska. It was the underground, for the SAC command posts and bodyguards for the generals and presidents and heads of states and stuff like that. That was a very good assignment. That's where I got my top secret clearance, by the way. Was only after 9 months in the service, I got a top secret clearance. That's what I held it all while I was in the service. After that, then I had assignment from Omaha. I went to RAF Elconbury in England and did a couple years there. Liked it. So when I came back to the States, I put back in for England. And I got assignment in 1980 to RAF Woodbridge, Bentwaters. Bentwaters is actually the main operating base. I mean, Woodbridge is just a satellite. So I got my orders in the summer of 1980, and of course the incident happened in December of 1980. So I wasn't at the base too long when the situation happened.
No, you weren't. You were only in the service for 7 years. You started in 73, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd only been in 7 years, but time in the military is a lifetime. For example, like when I was 21, I was in charge of security for 10 intercontinental ballistic missiles. I mean, in Montana. That was as a sergeant, not even a staff sergeant, just a sergeant. I mean, so things like that, your experience level is intense. At least it was back then. I can't relate to today's military, but back then it was.
Well, you grow up fast. I mean, you have to. I should be nowhere around anything at the age of 21 with what I was doing. So that's fascinating. The maturity level that you're able to get and the responsibility that they hand you. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and it wasn't me. It was everybody I was around was like that. I mean, we were all like that. I mean, it was it was a pleasure to work with these guys. They're all professionals. And one of the things I'm going to bring up right now, because some people get a little upset when I don't talk about women in the career field. There was none. At that time, we didn't allow women in the career field, security police, all right? They were allowed in law enforcement side of it, but not security. Sorry, that's
just different
the way
times.
It was.
Different
yeah,
times.
I mean, they end up eventually while I was in, toward the latter part, they end up opening up to, both male and female. So I always want to bring that up because people say, you're always talking about guys, you're always talking about the fellas, you're always talking about, guys. And I said, yeah, that's because that's all we had.
Yeah. Your response to that in the future could just be learn your history. That it's going to be okay. Women couldn't always vote. There was a very interesting time period that we've all gone through. Well, dude, your military career is insane, and I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for your service. I have a high reverence for folks that choose to go into the military, and I'm just grateful for you. And I actually was going to do the Air Force as well. I went to Colorado Springs. I was super pumped about it. It's just I needed corrective lenses for my vision, and you can't fly like that. I didn't want to be a ground crew. I wanted to fly fighter jets. That was my thing.
Yeah, I tell you what, and there's so many people I know that have that had the same aspirations, but because of impairments, which doesn't make any difference now,
Right, yeah.
Vision. So they contacts and laser and all this other stuff they can do. Yeah, and what's interesting about Colorado Springs, the officers that go there are 1% of our the top officers, flying officers in the United States Air Force. So, and those are the ones that end up flying the fighters and stuff. One interesting fact is with Rendlesham, General Williams, then Colonel Williams, he was a graduate of Annapolis, and that tells you how old he was. Yeah. And he was in the Air Force then. But, those academy grads, whether it's Annapolis or whether it's at Colorado Springs or wherever, are the top 1% of flying officers, and they are the cream of the crop. There's just no doubt about it.
Oh, those are the guys. Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And now girls. So well done, time period. Mm-hmm. Way to catch up. Well, cool. Well, way to bring it back. So let's talk about what you saw and what you experienced. So the Rendlesham Force case is something I've been following for years. This is just one of the most well-documented cases, especially because of the meticulous nature in which it was recorded, as well as just the craziness that occurred, just all sorts of ancillary phenomena with this as well. And so I'd like to break this down with you, my friend. Now, I know that you've told this story a million times. I'm going to ask you, if you don't mind, to tell it 1,000,001, and then I'd like to go through it with you as we do so, if you don't mind. So tell me about what happened December 26th of 1980.
All right, with some brevity, so stopping anywhere and interject anywhere you want. Began as a normal shift. We were doing, I was in charge of security for Woodbridge Base, and which meant that I had about 15, 16 security policemen that I was responsible for, a couple of restricted areas with A-10s. And then, of course, there was law enforcement who did the gate guard duty and stuff like that, but they worked for the law enforcement flight chief. And so it was business as usual. I ran through we got our people posted. I ran through my checklists for what I usually did, like lighting checks on the perimeter and stuff like that. I mean, really mundane stuff. And anyway, the security response team leader says, let's get together for, morning breakfast at midnight, and I said, okay. And so I meet him there, and he says, it was Sergeant McCulley, and McCulley says, hey, Penniston, he says, do you hear they're asking for you on the radio? And I said, no, I couldn't hear it. So he says, yeah, you're supposed to direct line him. So I went to the direct line there, and it's a direct line between the Chow Hall and the Central Security Control at Bentwaters. And Sergeant Coffey's online, and I said, what's up? And he says, hey, you need to go to East Gate right away. He says, we have a situation out there. And I said, okay, what is it? Because they would brief you. They used to go to them blind. And you go, well, the 2 law enforcement guys out there will brief you on it. I go, what? That was odd to begin with. I went, what? And I said, okay. And he says, run code 2. And that was even more odd because I still didn't know what's going on. And they want me to run with lights on the way there. I guess because they wanted me there fast. So I did. I arrived at the East Gate, and I contact Sergeant Bud Steffens. He's a senior law enforcement guy. I said, what's going on, Bud? Because it looked pretty peaceful when I got there at the East Gate. And I wasn't sure what to expect. And he says, he didn't say a word to me. He just points over into Rendlesham Forest at the tree line. I look over there and I go, oh, I was thinking, oh, that's strange. I could see multiple color lights and stuff in the woods and beyond the tree line there. And I says, oh, that sort of looks like a fire, you know? And I said, Bud, I said, did you hear that go down? Because I started thinking it was an aircraft crash. He says, it didn't crash. I said, what? It had to crash. I says, well, the trees are only like 5 and 6 feet apart in that forest. There's just no way anything could land there. I said, are you sure? And he says, yes, I'm positive. And I'm looking back over to it, and I said, oh, yeah, you know what? That's sort of, yeah, titanium could look like that burning, you know, yeah, okay. Because at that point in time, I'd probably been, I don't know, 20, 23, 24 aircraft crashes. You know, unfortunately, it was pretty common. And so I went over to the direct line at the East Gate, and that is this direct patch. I know I'm getting a little too much detail, but it's a direct patching to law enforcement. And so I get a hold of the law enforcement guy. He said, patch me right through the Central Security Control. And he did. Because once I arrived there, it was no longer a law enforcement situation. It was a security situation. Okay, that's how it works.
Right, right.
So we call it chopping, change of operational command and control. And it's pretty common. And so I get the security controller on, and he says, yeah, I said, we got what appears to be maybe a possible aircraft downing in Rendlesham Forest, which is about 300 yards away. And to give you an idea of the time that's being involved here, when I called Central Security Control, CSC, immediately I have the security controller on there, the comm plotter, the shift commander, the flight sergeant. Okay, these people are all right there. They're all got a headset on. They're all on the phone with me. And they're all doing their own little things as I'm reporting a possible aircraft crash. They're running checklists. They're making phone calls, you know. And this is all being done while I'm talking, you know, to the flight sergeant. And I said, it's possible. And then Sergeant Coffey interjects. He's a senior controller. He says, yeah, he said, I've just been in contact with London Radar and Eastern Radar. And he says, Bentwaters Radar. He says, we have a possible aircraft downing, he said, I think, because we lost contact with a bogey about 15 minutes ago. He says, over Woodbridge Base. So under the SOFA agreement, Status Forces Agreement with the Brits in the UK, we must have a bona fide emergency to deploy off base. You just can't go off base and start, you know, investigating things or stuff like that. You got to have an emergency situation. So therefore, with the aircraft or with the radar confirmation of losing a bogey over the base, and my observations, an emergency situation existed of a possible aircraft downing. Lieutenant Baran, who was a flight security officer, in the meantime, is also talking to the wing command post by phone, and he is in turn being patched through to the base commander, Colonel Conrad, and they're asking for permission for us to go off base and to investigate the crash. Usually, if we're running these, to give you some background, we're running an aircraft crash security response option. We are going to use our checklist. We're going to go out and plot it, find an exact location. I'm going to go ahead and determine where the most the best location is for the entry control point to be set up, so we can have our first responders, emergency people, mortuary, all these other people coming in, fire department. So that's what is involved there. And so we got permission from Colonel Conrad to go ahead and deploy off base. I wanted to take, one of my sergeants with me, security sergeants, Sergeant McCulley, who was experienced, and also maybe I said law enforcement Sergeant Steffens. He had actually been in the service longer than me, and they said no. Leave McCulley there. Go ahead and take the new airman that's working for the first night that night, Airman Kabanzak. Lucky him. And the law enforcement patrolman. And I said, "Who's that?" And he said, he says, "Burroughs." And I said, "Oh, okay." And I was hesitant. I said, "All right," because first of all, on an aircraft crash, security that sets everything up, and I have less work to do when the guy knows what he's doing, whether it's his first night or not. He's trained. The only people that had radios was myself and Airman Kabanzak. So we were told to deploy off base. We didn't need to have weapons, which is fine for aircraft crash. I grabbed, opened up the crash kit. We had a crash kit in my vehicle for that. They had all the supplies you need. So I pull out the plotting board, the camera we had for taking pictures of the accident scene, stuff like that. And myself, Kabanzak, and Burroughs, we deploy my Jeep. It's a CJ7 blue and white Jeep. It's not like you think of a military one. I mean, this had bubbles on it, lights and stuff. So I drive out there as far as I can go off-road. And the way it is, the Forestry Service uses the trees as a crop. Okay, once they grow to a certain level, they cut them, they replant, cut them, that's how they do it.
Interesting.
Yeah, and they're limited on their resources in that small country, so
yeah, makes sense.
That's what. Yeah, I mean, it's okay to do that, but they're doing it commercially. It's different. And so there's berms, earthen berms, where the trees would normally be, and of course at that time. It changes all the time. At that time, there was a clearing all the way up to almost the tree line at, the edge of the forest at Rendlesham. So there was about 200 yards of open area, which today is actually forested, but that back then it was cut trees. And so I went as far as I could with that Jeep, and I was starting to wonder if I was going to, have problems, tipping over in that. And besides, the first responders, the other, like the fire department, all those people, they can only go so far with their vehicles, their regular vehicles. So I figured that was about as far as I could go. I set up the entry control point with Aaron Kabanzak. He's got a radio. I tell him, and we were having radio transmissions problems at the time when we were out there, breaking up and stuff. Which is unusual too, because we had a repeating system all over the twin bases. There's just no way that would ever happen before that. And so I says, if I start breaking up, make sure you relay everything to CSC and to Sergeant, the flight sergeant, Sergeant Chandler, who's responding to the East Gate. He's taking my spot, by the way, because I'm no longer on base.
Okay.
Yeah. We had to multitask, that's the way it is. And so I said, anything he says to do, you relay it to me and we'll do it. And so I'm at that point with Aaron Burroughs and myself, we probably only had 50 yards to go, maybe less, to the tree line. The coloring in the woods was starting to dissipate. There was more of a bright light, white light, emanating out of it. And so as I started getting toward the tree line, and by the way, Burroughs is about 25 yards to the right of me. and I have Kabanzak, who's sitting about 40, 50 yards at the entry control point that I set up. And also, Central Security Control knows exactly where I'm at because I plotted in the entry control point. They know exactly where I'm at. So, you know, this is all important later on.
It's all fascinating now. So this is very cool. And I've already just got a ton of questions about what you've just already asked, but please continue.
Okay, let's go for it right now and just remember where we left off.
I will indeed. It's when you guys were in the forest approaching, and that's when John Burroughs was right next to you, about 25 feet. Okay, so I want to ask you about the radar. So this was radar returned on 3 different stations. So my question is where did it come from? What direction? Because just to set the scene for the audience, this is in Suffolk County in England, which is just northeast of London, and Bentwaters is more north, and then you've got the forest in between the two, and then Woodbridge. So the forest actually spans between the 2 bases, Woodbridge being the satellite base. So this was right in between. So just for some reference on the further, like I said, northeast of London. So which direction do you remember? Okay,
the base is sat 60 miles north west of London. Okay. And they were about 5 miles off the coast of North Sea. Bentwater is the main operating base. 3 miles away, as a crow flies, Rendlesham Forces in between the 2 bases is Woodbridge. So that's about 3 miles worth of forest there. The twin bases, by the way, had over 10,000 personnel. Military and civilians. They were pretty large. They were the largest tactical fighter wing in the Air Force at the time. So, with the radar confirmation out of Heathrow, the craft came out from the west, heading east. Okay, that's the first time that question's been asked, by the way.
What might be important?
Yeah, it is important, and so it was tracked. And the reason why Heathrow thought it was a military aircraft because it didn't have a transponder on it. You know.
Okay.
So they figured it was military, and that makes sense.
It does, and it may allude to also that there's not much high strangeness that's being caught on radar, or that they just assume that it's a military plane. So this is like a one-off. Right. I mean, because still at this point, you guys did not know what you were dealing with. You were looking forward to entering the forest to find a crashed aircraft, and instead you found a landed UFO, or hovering rather, UFO, which is totally different. But the radar is important on this, and that's why I asked. Okay, cool.
And then Bentwaters, they just do a circle of like 10, 15 miles out, 20 miles out. Something like that. I don't know. You have to ask the expert on how far out they went. It wasn't too far. Then Eastern Radar, which is at Broadsea, that was a British radar site. That wasn't far from Woodbridge and Martlesham Heath, our communication site, our C3 facility there. It was on the other side of that, so that was probably about 8 miles or 10 miles away. That was responsible for all of Eastern Radar. That's why they call it Eastern Radar. All the east side of Suffolk and Suffolk County, which ran all the way from the RAF Mildenhall and Lake and Heath all the way down to South End. That covered that whole section, Norfolk and that. So it came out of the west.
Okay, and Heathrow would be the furthest west point of radar return that you guys had gotten, right?
Yeah, but like I said, we're only 60 miles northwest of the London Heathrow. So, and the other thing is, when it's air flight, even a slow flight, it doesn't take long to get from point A to point B. I mean, especially over there, 60 miles is nothing.
Yeah, it's not Texas. Yeah, I hear you.
Right.
We measure distance in hours here. Okay, and it is interesting because I'm now just curious about the radar. I now want to know how far to the west it came from. Like, did it come all the way from the shore? Did it make a north and then turn from the west? Or were they just able to pick it up once it reached within their radar range, of course? And did it just make then a straight line to Rendlesham Forest?
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, that's okay. No. It's not something, like I said, I'd heard.
I don't know. I'm sure that, whoever the operator was at Heathrow knows that, but not to say that information was never discovered or obtained. It probably was. I just don't know.
I'm just curious, like if it came out of the water or if it came from the area of another military base that was found out to be secret, or one of the DUMBs, the deep underground military bases. So I was just curious about that part of it. It just may be relevant. So also I wanted to ask you about, so you've established the point, your entry control point, which is fantastic, man, about 50 yards outside of the tree line. It's you and 2 other officers, so 3 of you total went out in your Jeep, the Renegade. Now I just picture this thing also, by the way, with that badass eagle on the front of it, or that Phoenix, right? That Renegade thing. So also I wanted to ask you about your electronic disturbance. So this happened with your radios when you guys got closer, correct?
I noticed it, especially when I got to where I set the entry control point up.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of confusion going on there. I couldn't figure out why it was doing that, because it's never happened before. We had those repeating systems for that purpose. I mean, they're all over the Bentwaters and Woodridge base, so you wouldn't have a problem with it. The frequencies that were used on our IBRs, interbase radios, were security, law enforcement, and the command net. And of course, the fire department had theirs too. So it was important for us to have a repeating system. But when I started losing, when the radio was starting to break up, and it was my transmissions I was receiving were starting to break up. I didn't get a complaint from Central Security Control about mine breaking up or anything.
It was receiving. Okay, which makes sense. Okay, it's still interesting, and that's a wonderful point that you bring up, is that you didn't have...
That's the first time that's been asked. So.
Yeah, but you didn't have a problem being heard, but you did have an issue receiving where you were located, which is just adjacent to this craft.
And that was confirmed after the incident when I went back to security control. So I knew about it after the fact, too.
Yeah. Which is still interesting because you had some physical effects, which, let me turn you loose, if you don't mind, back on your story. I just wanted to establish those couple of things. They were just something I was curious about that I'd never heard anybody ask you, so that's why I asked. So you're about 50 yards out where you set the entry control point. You, John Burroughs is just to your right, you said about 25 yards, and you guys are walking through the forest. What happens next?
Right. All right, get up to a tree line. Like I said, the colors had dissipated pretty much, mainly because there's a bright white light inside the forest, just not far in. And I knew at that point that it was an aircraft crash. I determined that much because it just didn't have none of the makings of one at that point. So I called in, I terminated the security response option for the aircraft downing. And I implemented the security response option, which was a helping hand. A helping hand's up-channel report, telephonically done by radio, of a possible hostile threat. Okay. Due to the resources that we had at the base, the Priority A, Priority B, and Priority C resources, the airplanes, the ordnance, and things like that, it was a threat. And you also have to look at the time. The time in 1980 was a huge threat with a different type of terrorism. Okay, we had groups like Baader-Meinhof and Red Brigade, and the RA and Black September. I mean, these are different types of groups, and we also had like Lowestoft, which was a port that was only like 10 miles away. We had Russian sailors coming in there. Things like that. There's just there's a threat, a high threat. Plus, the height of the Cold War. It was, so I implemented the helping hand. And that goes to Sergeant Coffey, and they discuss it in there, and then they send it up telephonically or by phone to the Wing Command Post. Goes to the Wing Command Post to Numbered Air Force at Mildenhall. From Mildenhall, it goes to MAJCOM, Major Command at Ramstein. From Ramstein, it goes to the Pentagon. Okay?
This reminds me of the scene in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Have you ever seen that movie or read the book?
No.
Okay, there's a scene in it where aliens come and destroy the planet for spoiler alert, by the way, destroy the planet, this happens straight out the gate, for an international highway, like a bypass, right? And so, but they're full of all this bureaucracy. So this is one of the things that's advantageous for a protagonist later on because they get caught up in the bureaucracy and they don't go chase them, right? For the same thing that you're talking about here, where immediate action is needed, but there's so much red tape and, chains of command to go through to execute it. It's silly.
Okay, just put this in perspective, how fast the timeline's working right now.
Mm-hmm.
I arrived at the East Gate about midnight, 12:03. Okay, that's what I had in my notebook. Because I have to reports later on. That's why you record the times now. And from that time there at 12:03 arrival, I would say that only 5 minutes passed, or maybe 7 or 8 minutes to where I'm at the tree line. That's how fast everything's moving.
Right.
So anyways, by implementing that, and I was fine because Burroughs was at a distance over to the right, and then we had Kabanzak, who I visually can see, and farther at the East Gate, I can see Sergeant Chandler's there. So, everything seems okay. My job at that point in time, by implementing that SRO, is to determine, if there's a hostile threat. And if it is, report it. I'm unarmed at this point. I'm not going to do anything else but report. That was a little bit concerning. Okay.
Yeah.
I was like, I wish I was armed.
Well, it's interesting they don't. Is it that they don't allow you to take sidearms, or that they're not required so you can make the choice?
The Brits, under the SOFA agreement, Status Force Agreement, didn't allow us to take weapons off base unless there was an emergency situation. I barely went over that.
Yeah, that wasn't
it's part of the SOFA.
That's right.
And we could have took it, and there's just no need to take weapons for aircraft crash. I mean,
well, if it's Russian and the dude survives,
a radio call away, I can have more people there. And,
that's fair. Okay.
Yeah, and yeah.
Okay. And then also, I was just going to say for the audience also, we keep saying the words, the acronym RAF, that stands for Royal Air Force. So that's what an RAF base is. It's a Royal Air Force base that we were kind of helping out with or occupying or
no,
working.
there was our base.
And that's what I've heard too. It's like your base.
After World War II, we did the Brits had that Lend-Lease stuff, borrowing ships and all that stuff. Anyway, we got the lease agreement. I believe it was a 100-year lease on those bases. They're ours, but of course we're in a foreign country, so the Brits, it's still called an RAF base,
right? And
they had to have a RAF squadron commander on the base as a liaison. Because that makes the Brits feel better.
And it's like a
but everything
country.
we did was, we had most of the classified stuff we were doing was for U.S. eyes only. It wasn't shared. Okay, some was with the NATO, releasable and stuff like that, but for the main part, most of the stuff we did was non-releasable to foreign nationals. So. I know it's probably doesn't sit well with the British, but that's the way it is, It's
the way it is. I mean, that's just how it is. Okay, so my apologies. So you're approaching the craft now. So you've already determined that it is not a downed aircraft. It's something else, and that's why you put the call out. So response is on the way. What happened next? Okay.
Well, I started taking pictures at that point in time because I got a lot of pictures. I got roll film. And I don't have to take an aircraft crash, so I'm going to start taking pictures of what's going on. Because I don't have a weapon either, so I'm shooting with the camera. We had like Canon AE1s. I don't know if that makes any difference. They held like a 36 roll of film, black and white. I think the ASA on them were 400. They're pretty good film. I mean, but so I was shooting on that, and so. As a matter of fact, I was panicking type shooting, and so I shot way too much. Matter of fact, I shot to the point where I ran out as I entered the woods.
Before you could even make it.
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah, I know. I wish I could do things differently.
But was there, but that would be cool too. I mean, so let me ask you about the film then, now that we're at that point. Were you able to see it developed, or was it confiscated?
No, I dropped the film off at the base photo lab, did a work order on it. When I went and picked up, they were all whited out, which I thought was odd But then I find out even years later when I talked to Monroe Nevels, Sergeant Nevels, who worked disaster preparedness, he, the following morning when he was sent out to investigate the first night landing, he took pictures and everything too, and his didn't turn out either. And he developed his. He's a pride, like his hobby was photography, so he developed his at his house. And Monroe, I said, what's the deal? He said, he says the reason he says they didn't turn out is because of the beta radiation. I went,
So electronic disturbance coming into the area, photos don't develop even though you use two different means of developing. Like that's fascinating, man.
Yeah, and two different, like in the next morning, Monroe had the same problem. Beta, he could go into a lot of more information about it, but the beta is a short-lived radiation, okay? It was right at the landing site, but apparently, unlike gamma rays, which are deadly, you get those puppies, you're not going to be around very long.
Or you turn into the Hulk whenever you get upset. Like those are your two options. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. And
well, what this points to is very interesting because it shows that we can rule out malicious intent with these. So sometimes you'll hear, of damn it, I forget who was it that talked about that. There's been a lot of people who've talked about craft landing, them getting footage of it, and then the CIA or some official branch of the government coming in and confiscating it. And so this rules that out. It seems like that was a little earlier than we were doing that at this point. But then also it's one of those things that if it didn't develop, there's a scientific explanation for it rather than a nefarious one. So this is important to the story.
In this case, yes. In this situation, I can't speak for none of those rest of those.
No, and of course not. It's just we've heard it several times from several different folks. I just can't think of the name off the top of my head. But this is an interesting point to the story, though. So that's why I'm saying it.
So as I started going in there, I could feel like, static electricity. At first, I'm thinking adrenaline. Your adrenaline's causing this where you feel like you got static on your back of your neck and hair, face, clothes. I'm saying, I got to calm down. Stay, I had to stay grounded. And the thing that was grounded me, actually, that helped me, was I was running my checklist. For the response option. I mean, that helped. Believe me, there was a range of emotions that were just crazy. From fear to awe to, just crazy stuff. Anyway, as I approached, that's when I started feeling, besides the static electricity, and and all I could see, because of the berms, there was a berm in front of me. Over that is this white light, and fairly bright. I mean, this forest. I mean, just give you an idea that the trees that close together with the canopy the way it is, it's pretty dark. I mean, it's very dark. And I didn't even need a flashlight. Okay, I had a flashlight, but I never used it. It didn't need it. I had enough light for that.
Let me ask you about. Yeah, I do. Before we go over the berm and experience the craft visually for the first time in this account, were the lights that you could see that the craft was emanating, were they white and solid, or colored and oscillating, or were they white and oscillating? Like, did you see a pulse of any kind, or was it pretty steady?
I had a bubble of white light that was over the top of the berm. That's all I could see.
Okay, got it. And it was
solid. It was,
okay.
Yeah, it was solid. And to say it's white, I don't know. It was bluish white. I mean,
yeah.
It was bluish yellow at times. I mean, depends on where you're looking at it at. And yeah.
Well, and you got a better view of it. So take us over the berm to the craft.
Well, as I was coming to the berm, that's when I was, besides the static electricity, I was feeling, like my movements were labored. And I used the comparison of like walking waist deep through a pool of water, because that's the resistance I was getting. And I was, that is really bizarre. And but that is like right around where the craft was, like within 15 feet. I mean, I was pretty close in on that. As I came up over and get ready to go over the berm, there was a big flash of white light. I mean, a big one. And I guess out of reaction, I just hit the ground. There was no sound to it or nothing like that. I mean, but out of reaction, I reacted to it and I just hit the ground. And of course, not hearing no explosion or anything like that, I got out. And then as I got over the top of the berm, I seen the light start to dissipate down, the white light. And as that started dissipating down, I could start seeing the formation of a black craft, triangular in there. And here's, while you're still at the white light, you could still see like globular pieces of light in the fabric of the craft, the skin of it, that was going in and out of it, different colors. And that was starting to slow down. And finally, they just dissipated along with the white light. All I had was a white light coming out from the bottom of the craft. Still didn't need no flashlights. As I got closer to the craft, my movements became less restrictive. I still had the static electricity, but it was just less restricted. And also, there was a really deadening of the sound. I could hear no force sounds like the wind going through the trees and branches and crunching of forest floor and stuff like that. Didn't hear it. That was bizarre.
This is on my list to ask you anyway. It's called the Oz effect. So this is something that happens in a lot of high strangeness cases, is that you lose all sound of everything. Leaves crunching, wind blowing, animals in the normal sounds that you should hear in nature become deafeningly silent. And that is an interesting point that you made. But before we move on, I just have a question about the lights, because this is fascinating to me. So do you think that the light flashed that way in response to your approach, or do you just think that it was part of its, I guess, landing protocol that you just happened to happen upon it at that stage?
If I could guess, I guess at it, my guess would be that it was part of the landing protocol.
Okay, because then it seemed to be almost either either powering down or materializing, depending on.
Oh no, it was no. My impression was that it was powering down.
Okay,
that's a good. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah.
Oh, please. Why do you say that?
Because the less intensity of the white light to being disappeared, where you see just the craft, and then the other thing is because of the globular light that was running around inside the craft, that finally just started dissipating and slowed and disappeared. That's why it looked like it powered down.
Well, and also the nauseating or the difficulty in traversing, the physical effects that you felt from the environment of the presence of this craft, it seems like they lessened at the same time you got closer. So this could be two things. It could be a sphere of influence kind of a thing, like the closer you get to it, the easier it is to get to, kind of like a moat. Let's say, for instance, maybe this is part of the defense protocol that they've got, where they set out an area where it's just horrible to walk through, where it's very uncomfortable, and you don't want to go in there. And that keeps people away while they're doing what they're doing. Or it could be a result of the propulsion or the mechanism in which it operates being something that whenever you happened upon it, it was powering down at that time. Therefore, the effects lessened.
All that could very well be the case. It could all be the case. I don't know. My impression at the time and today are the same. I felt like the sphere of influence, this direct area around it, like it was trying the timing. It was trying to catch up. It wasn't the same as what was outside back where Burroughs was, or it was different. Because when I looked back at them, I did look at them. Kvanzak was just standing there. I mean, he was motionless. And then over here where Burroughs was, he was motionless, just standing there. And I was like, either they're scared to death and they're frozen, or they're not seeing this as I'm seeing it. I mean, there's a different influence going on here.
That's what it sounds like, right? It's a proximity thing, but also it's a timing thing. It's just, but you happened upon it and got to that distance as it was powering down. So therefore, perhaps it could be a result of that, not necessarily a sphere of influence. Either, like you said, either are absolutely possible. So let me ask you this. Kabansak and you were the only two that had a radio. Was he radioing to you to ask what you saw from your vantage point at any point in this?
I continued, as I even approached the tree line, I continued to do my security status checks. That's just part of our normal operating procedure. Security, okay, fence, post, whatever. You use a random word in there and not use the duress word.
Gotcha. Yeah. Everything's fine. It's just weird.
Yeah. So you want to make sure they're comfortable. I wasn't sure if it was survival because I didn't know what really happened, why these guys aren't moving, and so I didn't know I was going to survive and this encounter or this situation. So my job at that point in time is to get as much information as I can. All I got, I'm out of film, so all I got is my notebook. So I'm going to sit here and try to get as much information recorded so that survives and it is available to the command element to make command decisions and whatever they do. That's my job at that point. At least that's what I determined my job was. Get as much of the information as I could and document it. And that's what I did. I mean, I had no measuring devices out there or nothing like that, so I had to use what I had. I paced off the craft, which was 9 feet. My stride's about 3, so that's a guess. Okay, pretty close.
Well, I was going to ask you, do you do the stride, which is like a yard or 3 feet, or do you do the heel toe thing? Do you do both? Are both units of measurement for you? The reason I asked, my wife...
It'd be heel toe, I guess.
Okay. See, my wife gives me crap about this.
I had to think about that one. I don't know.
Well, a lot of people will use their stride, which is like 3 feet or like a yard. But then also they'll count heel to toe, which is about a foot, depending on what size your foot is. But you can rough estimate and just call it a foot. But this is how I measure stuff if I don't have a measuring device out here in the field. And my wife always thinks it's hilarious. I'm like, babe, this is how we do it. It's accurate, right? So it's nice to see that we're still doing that. So, okay. Now, and I've just got to compliment you on it, man, because your drawings, which I will be putting, of course, guys, in the show notes, the video audience, I'll go ahead and flash a couple here at this point. You did some wonderful hand drawings, the way that you detailed this out.
I am no artist, okay?
But you still,
and besides, I tell you what,
so
my notebook, one of the issues I have when I look at it, the pages, that is, you can see in the shakiness of my writing just how at times what a mess I was.
Well, yeah,
it wasn't. And so I tried my best on draw down descriptions. It was a little hard to tell with the height of the craft because of the berm and how it was sitting there. I'm 6'2", so I figured 6.5. So I'm guessing, my estimate, 6.5, 7 feet. That's about how tall it is to the dorsal fin of the craft in the back or the front. I don't know if what was back. I don't know what it was.
Well, the way it looked aerodynamically from your drawings looks like that was the front. Like the way we associate it aerodynamically is what we would assume to that. But you're right. It could flown upside down and sideways, because that's been another thing that I know even Bob Lazar talks about this, that the craft actually turns and the gravity amplifiers pull it. So it flies unaerodynamically from our perspective. So it is interesting. That's a great point.
The craft was above the ground. There was, like I said, light coming down from underneath the beams. I used the term light because that's not what it was, because it had to be holding the craft up. Okay, so what type of technology is it that looks like light that holds craft? I don't know what it is. So at first I says, that's impossible for light to do that. And so I tried to push the craft. I figured I'd get movement out of it because I didn't think it was fixed, but it was. But it just wasn't landing gear like I was used to. I mean, or was expecting.
This, by the way, is absolutely brilliant because you walked up to this crazy thing, having felt the way you felt, radio issues. You would later have film issues. You have all of these things, shaking hands with notes, and your first thing is, I'm just going to touch this thing to see if I can move it a bit. And that is amazing. It's
well,
great.
I figured if you had a Cadillac parked out there, car,
you rock it a bit, right?
You'd have to move a little bit, wouldn't it? I mean, that's on the ground. It's on top of the ground with tires, and I figured that would. This thing was solid and no movement, and so more perplexing and obvious that we, and being an off at Air Force Base, which I brought up earlier, with those classified briefings for all the, we had 36 generals there in different branches and all this other stuff, and NATO and CETO and everybody there. These briefings, we did a lot of research and development briefings and stuff like that. And, I'm there for security. However, you get to see everything that's being planned for the next 50 years,
Yeah.
And there's nothing even close to that, even today.
No.
Even today, for what happened in Rendlesham, I don't think can be replicated. Okay. The other thing is, besides measuring this off, I'm doing a lot of things at this time. I'm looking for all the things that make an aircraft fly. Okay. First of all, the fabric of the craft, the skin, is just absolutely seamless. It's like glass. So I'm looking for intakes. I'm looking for exhausts. I'm looking for a crew compartment. I'm looking for flaps and ailerons and blah, 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 blah. All the things that make an airplane, fly. This is a brick. This thing cannot fly. It doesn't have anything that we need to have to make it fly, okay? But it's sitting there into a space in this small clearing out in the middle of this forest. How did it get here? These are a lot of questions that are simultaneously just running through my head. I mean, just impossible. Because, the whole situation seemed impossible, but reality was different. I mean, you had... Yeah. Anyway, so the air temperature was about 32 degrees. We find this out afterwards. But the craft appeared to be warm to touch. Monroe Nevels told me later on, he says, that's not because it was hot. It was because it was radioactive.
Yeah.
It was beta. And I was saying, well, how, because I started checking out, well, how bad is beta? What can it do? And unfortunately, it's only temporary. The situation.
Oh, that's good.
Beta.
Yeah.
Oh, I was like, oh.
Like, thank God.
You gotta be, yeah. When he told me that, we were talking on the phone. I go, are you kidding me? I said, beta. I said, is that why it was warm? He said, oh yeah. He says, that you get warmth out of it.
But how warm are we talking? Like, okay, so it's 30 degrees outside. You're in England in December. Were you wearing gloves?
No.
Okay, and so when you touch the craft, I just have so many questions.
50 degrees, I would say 50 degrees.
So it wasn't scalding, but it was definitely significantly warmer than the outside temp.
Air temp's like 32, but you touch something that's, maybe like, your car's been running outside today. You said it's like 32 degrees or something like that out there. You go out there and touch your hood, you're going to feel warmth. Okay,
perfect. Okay, this is a great way to put it. Now, I'm also curious, when you touch the craft, did you feel any vibration or anything to give you the impression that something was running, like a motor or anything on the inside?
No, it was completely silent. There was no vibrations, nothing like that. Then as I... it is.
I mean, this whole story, man, like this whole damn story. Okay, please continue.
So this, 40 years later, I still get a little, I'm not stuttering because I can't think of what to say. It's just, sometimes it bothers me. That's all.
Well, it's got to. And if you ever want to,
I really work on it. I figure writing 2 books, they always say the best therapy is to write everything down.
Yeah. Well,
it does help. It does help. But, come on, but. I tell you what else helps is speaking about it at a conference. That helps me. Some I've had horrible conferences when I first started where I couldn't I just had to leave. I was done in the middle of it. I mean, can you imagine you pay to hear someone talking and you just leave?
Well,
I did that.
Yeah, but it's understandable, man. I mean, this had to give you some PTSD. This is not normal, and I want to go into that deeper with you. I have a couple, like I said, I've told several people that you were coming on, so I have some listener submitted questions for you, and one has to do with that. So, and if I just have to say this as well, if I ever ask you anything that you're not comfortable with, please just tell me that you'd rather not talk about it, and we'll move on. Like, absolutely, please.
Brandon, you can, after what I experienced out there, there's nothing you can ask me that would be uncomfortable compared to what happened out there, okay?
Fair enough.
It's just all you're looking for is you got questions, and I have questions too, even though I do have some knowledge of it. There's still questions. I mean, we all, I wish I did have I don't know if I wish I had the answers or not. I don't know. It's crazy.
Well, let's go into that. But I'd like for you to tell me what happened next on your story, and then we've got a lot after this to talk about. So the next thing that happened, what went down? Because your story gets a lot more interesting. So everybody out there listening, if you're not familiar with this, it's about to get crazy.
Well, yeah, you think it's I was starting to feel pretty good actually as I started pacing off the craft and taking the notes, because it's inert. It's not doing nothing. It's
not a threat.
No, it's not a threat. There's not flashing little lights running through the craft. I mean, it's just sitting there.
Not a big turret sitting on top of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm saying, and I'm still okay. I'm not hurt. It's great, and so it looks like I have a lot of time. That's what I figured. I have a lot of time. I have time for responses. I have time for additional responses from security forces. One of the reasons for the helping hand, and I didn't terminate that at all until after the incident, was at that time, one of the scenarios could be a ruse. It could be to misdirect security forces, a situation, why they would hit someplace else on the base. So we had all that, and that's why there was a restraint on how many people went out there, who went out there, why wasn't there immediate, 15 people following up and responding. We had our economy of force was not that huge. I don't want to go into details on that, but
it's classified. It's fine.
Yeah. It's not a good idea. But you could actually set up a diversion, and we really have another objective in mind. So that was part of that's going through my head too. Oh man, I mean, there's a lot of things going on through my head. But I was, I still did my security checks, and I was still writing. I mean, I'm fumbling too, and I got a radio. Oh, God. We didn't have headsets and stuff out there. It was sort of a mess. And as I went back around, I got a little bit of hope, because I could see that there was some type of writing on the craft. I went, oh, thank God. I hope it says something like NASA, even a sickle, and something like that on it, or anything. Even though it was beyond any technology known in the Jane's Book of Records or aircraft, as far as I knew, or in development, according to the research and development at Offutt. I was hoping that it was something familiar on it, but it wasn't like that. When I got around, it wasn't writing, or numbers. It was, I call them glyphs, glyphs that were symbols that were written. I'm using my hands here because that's all I have to measure with out there. They were about 5 to 6 feet wide. There was a row of symbols on the bottom. Then there was a larger one that was on top, which was a circle with a triangle and with 3 other little circles in it. So I recorded them, and I don't know if I sent you that photo or the part of the photo.
You did, and I'm putting it up here. So other artists have as well gone through and done digital recreations of this based on your account. I'll put that up as well. So guys, that's what the symbols look like. This is what he saw on the side of the craft. Spanned about 5 to 6 feet. It's about 5 to 6 inches tall.
Right. The symbols themselves on the row on the bottom, they were about 5 inches high, and this is how I measured. Okay, you can guess it. Whatever you think that is, I call it 5 inches.
Yeah, it's 5. Yeah, I'd go 8 max, but yeah, 5 for sure.
Okay, and the one on top was a lot bigger, maybe like a huge dinner plate size. Okay, the circle anyway. Anyway, so I'm touching the craft itself, and like I said, it felt like smooth like black glass. There was no rivets, nothing like that. And when I say black glass, I'm talking about that was the coloring of it, the smoothness of it. But did I think it was glass? No, it was metal. There's definitely some kind of metal. I just don't know what it was. And so I kept on walking, did my 360, and I stopped, and I'm thinking, you know what? This thing's void of everything except those markings on the other side. That's got my interest, and so I'm going on the other side. I'm going to sit there and check them out more. Not the best move. It wasn't when I figured in the end, anyway. So when I got back around, and I'll tell you, the smoothness of the craft, like I said, I went over the black glass part. But when I got to the symbols, they equated, and I tell you, they were like etched in the craft itself, and they felt like going from this smooth black glass to like sandpaper, coarse sandpaper. That's what it felt like. And so those symbols are on the bottom. And then I'm fascinated by the one on top because it's unusual. It's not in the same row. It's got this. It's larger. I mean, there's this. The triangle seemed familiar because I don't know. We're just used to seeing triangles, aren't we? Throughout our lifetime or something, math or whatever.
Geometry. Yeah.
So I touch it, right? And when I touched it, I'm blinded. I mean, I'm blinded where I cannot see nothing but pure white and nothing else. That's it.
Okay. Let me stop you there. So whenever you had this flash of light, did the light come from the craft or was this in your mind's eye?
I don't know. Mind's eye, I don't know. I can't. To me,
it would be hard to tell. I mean, and even if...
To me, I would say, I actually thought at the moment it was from the craft, okay? But I discounted that pretty fast later. And I'll tell you why. Well, anyway, so I'm touching this, right, and I got this bright white light, and the mind's eye part, I would say, would be to seeing these flashing of ones and zeros.
Oh, yeah.
I said, what the fuck is that? This whole thing was like, I mean, you took an unbelievable situation and got more unbelievable, more unbelievable, more unbelievable. I mean, that's what was going on. And then I just sort of gained my senses, and all I did was just lift my hand off, because I was aware I was touching it. And I just lifted my hand off, and it was gone. Everything's back normal. And that's what tells me that there's something that happened that was a technology that I still don't understand, a communication or whatever you want to call it, because out in that forest, and as dark as it is, and you have something that bright, you would have no night vision for at least an hour, I would say. Maybe 45 minutes, maybe a half hour at tops. No night vision.
It's the equivalent like
I had night vision, like it never happened.
That's crazy. So it had to be more of a mind's eye thing. Plus, I was going to just ask also to this, John Burroughs didn't mention a flare-up or anything like that. The other two officers that you were with, they didn't mention seeing it pulse really brightly at any point.
We didn't talk immediately. We didn't talk about the incident at all.
Okay, interesting.
Not right away. I overheard what he's seen at the debriefing 3 days later, or 2 days later. Yeah, because I was there. Kabanzak, I heard what he said. It was on a documentary, actually, what he's seen. It's out of his mouth, so I believe it. He also said that he was told, and this is another thing and part of the cover-up. He was told to go ahead and just sign a pre-written statement, which to me says that is exactly what happened to me. And this is after I gave him a statement, and they went and rewrote it. And I got this after 4 pages of legal pad writing. I get a little type single space piece of thing like this is so generic, and it was like got within 50 meters, and it was mechanical in nature, and that's about it. But that's the story I had to tell. They said I had to tell that to the base and wing commander when they see me that day. And I says, that ain't what happened. They said, well, you say we're an open investigation. You say that, this goes away. Okay, it goes away.
Yeah.
And when open investigations like that, I'm getting off subject here, but I always felt bad telling the wing commander and that this what I was told from by the agents down there what to say. Okay, and so I got to meet retired General Williams out in Tucson a few years back, and I says, General Williams, I says, I got to apologize to you. I says, for lying to you that day with this story that, I got at the OSI building. They told me I had to say this if I was asked anything about this. He was so cool. He goes, but his response was unique. He says, don't worry about it, Jim. He says, we all follow orders.
That's right. That's right. And I mean, you were what, 26 at the time?
Yeah, he says, don't worry about it. And I felt guilty about it for all those years. And he's just like, don't worry about it. We all follow orders. But that tells me he said he had his orders too.
Uh-huh.
So
he's probably had to sign some things that he didn't write too. Yeah. It's very interesting, man. And they just they made you take all the woo out of it, which is just crazy to me. I mean, that's like the most interesting part of the story, which I'm grateful for that you've come out now and written your amazing book, The Rendlesham Enigma, which we haven't even mentioned yet. But of course, guys, it's going to be linked down in the show notes. Make sure that you check this
all this information is in the Enigma book and more.
And more. That book, you wrote how many pages? 703? 702?
Yeah, 702 pages of that, which is different than most of your books on incidents. 300 pages my co-author wrote were endnotes to back up everything we're saying.
Yeah,
in fact, this was you got to go ahead and back up what you're saying. Just don't take my word for it, because the goal of the book is the history of what happened, the history book of what happened, and of the landing and the aftermath. And I guess the other important part of the book is to make sure the public had the facts, and if they have the facts, they can determine whatever they want to believe after they read it. I don't care. I mean, at least they have the facts. They can make up their own minds. Oh, Penniston's crazy. No, this happened. Whatever. I don't care. But at least the facts are presented, and then they can make up their own mind, the reader. And that was the whole intent behind the book, and still is the whole intent. Even talking about today, it's not. I'm not here to convince you, and I don't want. I want you to get the facts, and I want you to go ahead and make your own decisions on it. That's what you got to do. That's what I want you to do anyway.
Well, I find you credible, and for several reasons. You're just very altruistic. I've heard this story many times. I've heard you retell it many times, and it stays the same. You've gotten new information that you've been willing to come out with, but not add to for any nefarious reason, man. I'd take you as altruistic. As well as, I mean, you've got the next night when it happened, December 28th, just 2 nights later, and you have Colonel Charles Halt out there with a recorder, got to see it again. And so you've got redundancies in this. You're good, man. And the people that don't want to listen to it, that's fine.
The first night, I mean, when I wrote the first book, I was writing that, all the guys that I worked with that night, most of them, I would say that 90% of them, we're still in contact. Okay, we're today. They said, make sure you put this in there. I've seen this from this point, or make sure you add that in, whatever. So I was getting their input too on what they seen from a peripheral standpoint. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
wherever they were at as a witness.
Yeah.
And but like for example, Bertolino, who's who was actually, I believe he was on. He can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe I get them mixed up sometimes, the names. I believe he was on Bentwaters on the security response team with Sergeant Hall, and they actually seen the landing. I never did see a landing.
Right.
They actually saw the first, and then they actually seen the takeoff, and I was too close for the takeoff, like they seen it from their vantage point. This bubble of light that was over the canopy of the woods, they seen it take off up in the air, make it, move, and then take off over toward the North Sea. They had a better view of that than I did. What I seen was, I was just really close, to see it from that perspective,
Well, but you got a very unique experience out of this, man. And I want to come back to the binary, because I know people are out there going, so what'd the binary mean? But if you don't mind, just tell us why it took you a minute to get back to that.
Far as what?
The binary code. So just tell us. Yeah.
Once I took my hand off that, everything went back north. I guess normal. You want to say normal for the situation? Yeah, these are the things I need help with words. I don't know. I know that's why it took so long to write the book. Even the chapter of the encounter, it wasn't because I'm trying to be creative. It took me like 8 or 9 rewrites and months to write one chapter. It's just because I wanted to make sure it was descriptive enough on what was actually going on and what I was seeing. And it made it very hard to write. I'm like, I need a word for this. This is what I'm trying to convey. I did have help that way, with the co-author and stuff like that.
Well, also you're tackling the attempt to be articulate in something unarticulatable. Like, it's very challenging to put that into words, especially the flash, what you felt. All of these things, and there's so many things that happen that it's understandable, man. Yeah, you're good, dude, and you did a wonderful job.
Well, I don't know. When I look back in hindsight, I could have done things differently.
It's for everybody, man. Don't worry about it.
One is like I made a mistake by thinking it wasn't going to go anywhere. That influenced a lot. It changes your whole mode of operating. You know what I mean? So
it makes sense.
Yeah.
So
anyway,
you wrote the binary down in your notebook, and then what?
No, I didn't. I didn't do it there. No, I was there's just too much going on. Anyway, get away from the craft. I'll make this really short with some using brevity on this. Got away from the craft. I seen the lights powering up. That's what I call it, powering up, because there's a guy got movement again. Okay, and I'm thinking, I must have activated something. Holy shit! I'm like that. I must have activated something. I'm getting also now starting to get reactive again with this lighting. So I got back away from about 10 feet, and I got down, and I was almost trying to dig a hole in the ground because I wanted to get down as far as I could. I thought I activated it and it might explode. There's just no way I could get away from it far enough. And what it did is, when it powered up, it started to brighten up again. I lost the whole craft in there. That was the silhouette of that was gone, and this bright white light. And as it moved up, and this is what I can't understand this today either. Like those trees I mentioned earlier were 5 or 6 feet apart. The craft, but by my own testimony, or at least 9 feet, right? Moved back through those trees, and then slowly went up to the canopy of the forest, made a slight turn, and was gone in a blink of an eye. Okay, complete darkness out there now. Okay, I hear Burroughs runs up to me. So he's all right. That's my first thought. He's all right. Okay. He says, do you see that? Do you see that? And he goes, look, over there. I'm going, what? Like, what the hell? Over where? There ain't no, it's gone. And this is what I'm thinking. And he takes off. heading into the forest. What the heck? Our team concept is blowing. I don't know what he's not acting
solidarity.
professional. Like he's not in the military or something. He's just I don't know what he is. He was young. He was young and stupid, I guess. I don't know, or just let his emotions run over. I don't know what happened. You'd have to ask him that.
That's fair.
So I chased him because I can't lose him.
Especially after what you just been through. You're like, I don't want to be alone. Let's go.
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't know what he's seeing there. It's just too dark. There's nothing to see. So, like I said, the forest looked different back then. So I only went another maybe 30 or 40 feet into the forest and ran to a first fence, barbed wire, and then there was a second right behind it, and that was barbed wire, and then there was a farmer's field. Well, he's a lot taller than me. I think he's like 6'5". He hopped those. I hopped them, but it was sort of bad. It wasn't as good as yeah. I got over him, and so I'm chasing after him across this farmer's field. And like I said, it was like 32 degrees temperature. So there was water in the field, in between the rows that had been furrows, and with thin ice on them and stuff like that. So I fell down a few times. I got soaked. And so I'm still chasing him. I get past the farmer's houses. I get to a road. And thank God he stops. So I catch up with him. I says, what the hell are you? I'm using good words here. What the hell are you doing? Yeah. Are you chasing? He says, I'm chasing a crowd. And then he points over in the opposite direction. And I said, where is it? And he says, over there. And I said, where? And I'm looking over here. And I says, okay, point to it and let me look down your arm. Okay. I mean, it says, stay calm, And I looked down his arm, and he's pointing off to the lighthouse. That's how it went into the statement about the lighthouse. I said, that's the lighthouse. Oh. And we didn't even get that said. I look over to the right, and there's that craft over the Capel Green forest area. It's just sitting there. I thought it was gone. And then it starts moving off very slowly out toward the North Sea. And it's only going slowly, 200, 300 miles an hour. Okay.
Yeah, just at a brisk pace. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
leisurely
that's
stroll.
Slow. It's not at no. What I see, it wasn't like it just. I'm guessing it wasn't a blink of an eye. It just disappeared. It's just that it was so fast when it left, and that's the other thing. When it left, there was no air disturbance, there was no sound, and there would have had to been at that speed a sonic boom. There wasn't that.
Yeah, from our aircraft, yeah. And there's different theories on why they do that, or why there's a lack of a sonic boom, which is very, very interesting.
Okay, and yeah, I know, but these are all things that at the time, run through my head.
You observe this properly. I mean, that's the thing, is you have to note this kind of thing. And there should have been sonic booms. There should have been wind disturbances. It
had to be air displacement. I mean, how does that lift up, and how does it move? And how in the hell did it move through those trees? Why would it do that? Well, maybe if you start looking back in retrospect after 40 years, you say, well, maybe because it can manipulate space, time, lots of things. I mean, there's all kinds of working theories you can throw into it that people have, and yeah. So
I'm grateful that you pointed out the lighthouse.
That's the incident. Oh yeah. And Burroughs put that in a statement. I don't know why he put that in a statement, because I don't know, because I don't know. You didn't see, I guess what I seen, he told Halt on, when we were at the base commander's office, deputy base. Yeah, he says, I see a triangular craft. He drew a picture of one. He did that stuff, but it's like, oh man, he's missing a lot of shit. Why?
From his observation, it's interesting. But
looking back now, you start looking and think, well, that's why one of the theories of the time distortion come in at is maybe for him, maybe everything was instantaneous. Maybe nothing, no half hour looking around the craft and stuff happened. You know?
Okay, so this is it. I have two things before we move on to your binary that I'm very curious about. So how long did you experience being in the area of the craft and interacting with it?
I would say about, it had to be a half hour.
Okay, and did they notice the same amount of time go by as well?
No, because his observation, usually all he talked about is the craft itself. He didn't say me walking around it or nothing like that. I mean, he missed all that. That's why I said it must be instant for him. But the reason I'm concerned about time is when I got back into CSC, turn my weapon in and all this stuff and get debriefed. My watch was a half hour off.
That's it.
He
yes.
didn't have a watch.
Okay.
I wish he did. I had one that was a half hour off. I'm saying, well, mine's half hour off here. What's the deal here?
But it was a half hour ahead.
My watch?
Yeah.
No, it was a half hour, I think, behind.
So you had missing time, but you were conscious during the missing time, which is crazy. I thought it was the other way around, to where you had 30 extra
might have
minutes.
Been, you know what? I can't really remember now. I don't know. That's why I'm guessing. I can't remember if it was before
Probably
or
not
after.
a detail you really thought about. It's interesting.
No, but I'm sure I wrote this down in the Enigma because I had my journals. I kept journals in the Air Force for every day I was in, so I had that stuff I used or I helped write the book. I'm sure that's written in there. I don't know 100% because I'll tell you what, after 9 or 10, manuscript drafts, yeah, you do. I'm not sure if everyone all. Sometimes I think, oh, that's in a book. Oh no, that was like a manuscript draft number 3. We left that out because the book was too long.
Right. Yeah, we had to cut it down to 703 pages.
Yeah, like what do you cut? I mean, Gary and I, if we did it the way we wanted to, we probably had a 1,500-page book. I mean, that's why we're going to write. That's why we're going to write additional books.
Yeah, it's called Book
Not about
One.
the incident. Book 1 is definitive about the incident.
Yeah.
But about the findings with the binary and all that stuff, that is going to be in book 2.
Now we're talking. So let's get to that. So I'm just going to fast track you just a little bit on this, just for time's sake, man. But you are amazing. I'm
just trying to avoid it. You notice this is subconsciously avoiding it, and I do that every once in a while. I just caught myself. Thanks about the binary.
Oh, awesome!
I do that.
Okay.
I do that. I know, and other people have pointed it out. I got to try to catch myself not to do that. See, I'll start changing subject and talk about different things rather than talk about it.
No. I'm the reason that the time is off. I just have so many questions for you. I just want to kind of stop you and keep going. But for everybody, the book will be linked in the show notes. Of course, please take a look at this and any other thing, way that you've been interviewed. This is probably the best one. We're getting the most out of you right here, which is wonderful. I'm hearing you talk about things you haven't before, and that's awesome. So I wanted to ask, so you had started getting the reports that I'd heard you say was that you started getting kind of headaches or intenseness, and so you went down and just wrote this down. So what led you to jot down the binary in the first place?
So I'm up all day. Okay, I can't sleep. I mean, I write all of it off, and I'm sure it is because of the trauma, of what happened. And so I'm up all day, and man, I mean, it's like getting 11 o'clock at night on that Saturday. I mean, after the incident, and I was like, man, I gotta try to get some sleep, So I lay down in bed, and when I shut my eyes, this is the mind's eye stuff, and all of a sudden I start seeing these ones and zeros, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0, 1. I said, what the hell is that? Oh no! I said, this is just great. I said, I'm losing my mind. I'm traumatized. I'm going to have to end up going into the base hospital. How in the hell am I going to explain this? I mean, where do I start? I'll end up getting, ending my career, off the weapons list, separation pay, all that went through my head. I'm not going to be able to beat this because I'm going to have to go and get some kind of medical or something wrong. So I get up, and I'm not going to sleep anyway, so I make a pot of coffee like at midnight. And I sit down in my living room, and I said, well, I wonder if all this happened exactly like this. Maybe I'm traumatized. I pull out my notebook. off the counter I had it on. I'm looking through it, mainly at my notes. I'm looking at my notes. Oh, yeah. I'll go through it. You know, I think I can write those ones and zeros down. So I get a pen, and of course, you know, I got all these pages in the back of notebooks. So I flip back there. That's the only paper I had anyway. And so I close my eyes and I go 1 0 0 0 1 1 1 0 1 0. And I start writing them down. And the thing was, I didn't want to stop because it felt good. It felt great. I felt better. And I said, "Oh, that's nice because I don't want to go into the base hospital and have to talk about this stuff. I mean, this crazy stuff." So, and I get to one point where my pen, you know, clogs up. So I'm panicking, looking for another pen, you know, trying to find one that works in the drawer, you know. And I find another one, and so, this is important because I would have to later on find out that I had to start where I left off mentally. I don't know how in the hell that can happen. It's impossible, I would think. And so I finished out writing out, and I get after about 16 pages and writing them down in this notebook, all of a sudden I can't see those ones and zeros anymore. I stopped. That's it. And I went, "Okay, you feel good, Jim. Wow, you might have just dodged a bullet. Let's see how you feel tomorrow morning. I wonder if I can go to sleep." I'm thinking all that stuff. And despite the pot of coffee, I go to bed and I sleep until like 10 or something the next morning, or 11. I mean, I sleep a long time. I get up and I feel great. I went, "Oh my God, you dodged a bullet here. You're going to be all right." Okay, career's intact. Do I tell anybody about that? I'm not going to tell anybody about that. There's just no way I'm going to tell anybody about me having a mental breakdown after the incident, you know? That's what it was, I thought, at the time. So, pack rat, I keep everything. So, you know, like the notebook gets put away, you know, whatever. 30 years later, we're doing a film shoot out in California for Ancient Aliens. Let's see, it's Prometheus Pictures. They're the ones that were doing Ancient Aliens, and Kim Sharon was the producer. And so back at that time, they didn't have, when we did that, they had film. They didn't have the digital. That was it. So I'm out there with Burroughs and Linda Moulton Hauser, and I'm being interviewed, and they have to change film. I said, okay. So when I'm talking to Burroughs and he's talking to me, you know, he's talking to me while I'm trying to think of what I'm going to, you know, say, you know. And he says, well, he asked me about a date. I said, oh, I think I have that in the notebook. So I'm flicking through the notebook, and I flick it too far back, and the ones and the zeros are there. Well, once that happens, I mean, it was like Linda Moulton Howe, like a hungry dog seeing red meat. Okay, this is the way she acted. Says, that's binary code. I went, what? I says, oh, that's binary code, ones and zeros. I didn't know. I'm a criminal justice major, you know. I don't know.
Exactly.
And I said, oh, really? And then they were like relentless, Burroughs and them, about, well, when you get that, when you write that, I said, oh, I wrote that down. And I figured, what the hell? Might as well tell them. I mean, I'm out of the service. I got my retirement. What the hell? So I said, oh, I said, this is after the incident. I said, at home, I said, I wrote all this down. I said, I couldn't sleep. And they go, oh my God, oh, that's a smoking gun. I said, no, it's probably gibberish. I said, I was losing my, you know, I think I was crazy, you know, losing my mind, trauma. And so they were relentless about it. So, I mean, she and Burroughs called me when I went back to Illinois. They must have called me twice a day. Okay, they wanted to do something. So I get a call from Kim Sharon, though. She says, okay, it probably is gibberish, okay? It probably doesn't meaningless. That's what she said. I said, okay. I said, that's what I'm thinking. And I said, because I wasn't in a good state of mind. And she says, I'll tell you what, can you go ahead and scan, like a few pages and send it to us, and we'll have someone look at it. I said, okay, this is like between you and me. She goes, yeah, no problem. So that's what I did. I sent her like 5 pages, and 3 days later, and besides, you got to remember, I'm getting badgered by Howell and Burroughs constantly.
Oh yeah, I would have if I were there, I would have been in the 3rd on the list. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, it's terrible. And no, it was just horrible. I wouldn't answer the phone. It got to the point.
Oh, that's not good. I wouldn't have been like that.
No,
yeah.
Oh, I know. When I seen the number, I went,
they're eager, man. This is the first time that's happened, so it's a very interesting thing. Plus, it's translatable. Like you were given a message.
Yeah. Well, so I get a call from Kim, and our technology wasn't as great back then. With like Skype and Zoom and all that. So anyway, we set up a Skype call, and I think it was Skype. I don't know. But because she was on the phone with me, and then I went through on the screen, and a guy named Nick Sisk, I think, went and deciphered. She says, Jim, there's actually a message there. I said, there's no fucking way there could be a message there. That's what I said, quote unquote. And she says, no, there is. I said, no way. It can't, because I know how it happened. I was sitting there losing my sanity. At least so I thought. And she started to go through it. It started out with, and it listed 7 coordinates. The first coordinate and the last coordinates were the same one. Okay. Which they like to sensationalize as calling it High Brazil coordinate. Okay.
Oh, yes. That is so interesting, which is an ancient island. It's not even around anymore.
Not around, but it is sitting 60 feet down. They got
it used to be
image.
Yeah.
Well, they got imagery of that where they can see it under the coordinate sites. They can see the island there.
I want to say it was like Scotland's or Druids Atlantis. Isn't that what they called it?
Ireland, it was Ireland.
Yes,
so,
that's right. They're Atlantis. It's fascinating. Very cool.
So anyway, when she told me that, fine, okay. And I says, okay, now I don't trust Prometheus, who I have no reason not to trust him. I don't trust him because I don't believe it. Okay. And also, so I said, okay, so I call up Linda and I said, Linda, you want 5 pages that you want to try to get deciphered? She was like salivating over it. She goes, okay. So I said, yeah, I'll go ahead and send them to you. And I did. And about 3 days later, 4 days later, she told me she was going to send some professor down in Australia to decipher, one in North Carolina. Then she's going to have someone there in Arizona decipher it. Okay. Anyway, about 3 or 4 days later, I get a call, and she is giddy. She says, there's a message in there. I said, well, okay, tell me what it is. I'm at that point, I already had my big shock there with Prometheus. And she went through it, and I said, oh, okay. She says, well, aren't you excited? So, well, that's exactly what Prometheus came up with. I said, I was just double checking. And she got pissed.
Oh, that you gave it to them and not her?
Yeah, she says, you gave it to them. You gave it to them first? Yeah. Well, I don't trust her. She's a ufologist, a UFO, opportunist and entertainer. You know what I mean? I didn't believe her.
Some folks in the game are like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't. I'm not going to give something that crazy to someone that's in the game to make money off of it.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah.
So the point is, the binary code would never have been discovered if it wasn't for those two.
I love this story. I love this part of the story. You just put it under your bed or something.
It's in the book.
For like 30 years, you just sat on it and just didn't throw it away.
It would never got out. So there was, it came out. And then we went and did another show with Ancient Aliens, and they were going to do it overseas, which I wanted to see. What I wanted to see if I could get Total Recall, take witnesses back to the crime scene, okay? And if Burroughs was with me, I might be able to remember more or something, And sure enough, that was the case. But they were like persistent that we had to make this public. And I said, I don't know if I want to do that. And they said, oh, no, we got to. So constant badgering. And I'm not pulling no punches. It's nothing personal with them. But they're just badgering. At least I thought it that way. And I finally gave in. I said, okay, I guess so. I guess maybe the fact that I got this information and it does actually say something, maybe that means it needs to be public. I guess. I don't know. And so they did a show and it was released public. I got all kinds of shit over that. Everything from the new Billy Meyer stuff to making shit up. I was like, what the hell? I said, well, so no one believes it. I said, my God, that's fine. But don't sit there and call me a liar and attack me. That's not, there's no reason for that. Just say you don't believe it.
Well, and you've offered this up for forensic analysis. You've offered for people to look at it and date the ink and all of that. Nobody's taken you up on it. The
notebook. Oh, I got a good story about that one too, because we did that initially, and I guess it's Robert Wood is the guy who did it. Okay, he's in L.A. and he does documents anyway. Okay, that's what he does. But he's also tied into ufology somehow. Anyway, Dr. Wood said that, yeah, everything in there happened, or the notebook was written in 1980, the ink and all this stuff. So, and of course, even Burroughs had his doubts about that, even though he was told that by him. He didn't told. I said, okay, whatever. I said, well, that's the case. He said, well, you need to, because he asked me, so you need to get authenticated. I said, no problem. I don't have a problem doing that. But he didn't like the answer. I think he was looking for an answer that wasn't true or something. I don't know. Anyway, so there's a National UFO Symposium, 50th anniversary in Irvine, California. I think it was 2019 or it could have been 2018. I can't remember now. I think 2019. Okay, it's before the all that mess thing there. Well,
I love it. I know what you're talking about. We all do. It was before you had to take your shoes off before you got on planes. Yeah, I get it.
Anyway,
the good old days.
Yeah, and so yeah, and so I'm out there, and guess who's on the panel? On one of these panels, Dr. Wood. Yo, hey, how you doing? Robert Wood. And I said, yeah, it's Jim Penn. Oh, he said, I know who you are. And I said, oh, let's talk about that notebook. Oh, yeah, he said, I authenticated it. And he says, yeah, he says, it's written within, I can only say within, the few months of December 19th. I can't be exact. He says, we can't, not yet. He says, someday you will. I said, okay. He said, so we talked about it. So he went into more detail, which is going to be in upcoming second edition. We're going to do a update on all the new witnesses and information that came out.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so if you got it on, and I really do think you should try to get it on Kindle, because that's an automatic update for you. You automatically get the update.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, Robert told me more about it. He says, oh no, he says the ink's the right type. He went through all kinds of stuff on it. I said, so you're saying you're 100% sure? He says, I'm 99.9% sure. He says, I'm never 100% sure about nothing.
Yeah.
I said, okay. So
good
I went,
position.
Oh, 99%, I'll take that. And he says, why are you asking anyway? He said, the nose is authentic. I says, yeah, but there's people out there that, don't think so. I don't know. I think I fabricated a book or something. I don't know. There's people out there like that.
You've got not only your experience that you had with this, which was obviously traumatic, but also you've got tons of scrutiny, and it does have to do with Burroughs' misidentification of the lighthouse, which was later put in the reporter. That's how he reported it.
Well, the fact that he's a loose cannon. He's just a loose cannon. I mean, he'll throw anything at a wall, hoping it sticks.
Well, unfortunately, like you have a lot of trepidation for this, but a lot of people just jump out to discredit you. Besides maybe treating you like a human being, like, hey, you went through something, you saw something very, very interesting.
Well, one of the things is I have an outstanding Air Force career.
You do
perfect performance reports, generals, and everything else. I don't want to get into all that. I mean, it's a very good career. I've never had a person I work for ever say a bad thing about me, ever, until recently. but yeah, and so you say what you want, say you don't believe something, or say something and you think it's a hoax, or whatever you want. You can say all that. I'm okay. I'm okay with you being a skeptic. I mean, I don't have a problem with that. But whatever you do, don't call me a liar, or don't attack me personally. You got to be kidding me. My kids, they said, "Oh my God, we should tell them about the rules about lying in the house, about the growing up." They said, and the truth is, I never penalized my kids ever. How bad it was, as long as they told me the truth. And believe me, that's hard to do with your kids. If they tell you the truth, you don't penalize them. Okay,
that's how it should be.
It's a freebie. Yeah, it's a freebie. It's wrong, but it's a freebie. Yeah, that's why
you've got all girls too, right?
I got 3 girls.
That is a handful, dude. Yeah. So I want to come back to the binary real quick, because do you mind if I go ahead and tell the audience what it said, or what it was decoded to read?
No, I'll tell you, be more accurate, because you probably have it in front of you.
I do. It's called, so once this was binary was decoded, not only were there several, and you said 7, well, 6 total, 1 was repeated, coordinates to sacred sites around the world. So one, like you said, was High Brazil. The other was, of course, the temple at Apollo, the pyramids at Giza, and then also Nazca line. So these are all famous things in ufology and high strangeness.
Pretty much all of them have pyramids.
Yes, that's a good point. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Actually, I didn't even make that connection, but good call. That's a damn good call.
The one in China does too. The one in China has a pyramid.
Well, there are pyramids all over the damn place, like Bosnia, Antarctica, whatever the hell that is.
There's a good reason why they're building pyramids, so because they're permanent.
Yeah. Wind sharing is not an issue. Really, erosion doesn't really take that long of a toll. I think the biggest issue they had down there with the Mayan pyramids was just jungle growing over it and having to cut it back away. That was it. As far as degradation goes, you're right. They can survive earthquakes. It's interesting and good point. So when this was decoded, besides the sacred sites, it read, "Exploration of humanity continues for planetary advance." And then it goes on to read, "Eyes of your eyes," and then origin year 8100. Now, let's break that down just a little bit. So, whenever you talk about exploration of humanity continues for planetary advance, now it didn't say continuous. Yeah. Yes, sir. My apologies. It didn't say for traveling. It just said planetary, humanity. So it didn't say anything about how to get here, what that looks like. That's an interesting part, perhaps. Eyes of your eyes is very interesting as well. What do you think that part of it means, eyes of your eyes? Have you thought about that? I don't believe
I have thought about that. I don't believe not everybody can see.
Yeah, okay. I love that one. How I read it, just simply based on the year 8100 and the fact that you and I have already talked about, we haven't brought it up here yet, but time travel is one thing that I'd like to talk to you about next. But this is one clue.
Interdimensional travel.
Interdimensional or time travel. I love this. Intertempestrials, as Dr. Michael P. Masters calls them.
That's a good word. You know what? Might come up a really good word for that. That is a good word.
It's great, right? That's Michael P. Masters. Yeah, he's awesome. And you've read the book. This is one thing that was interesting to me. So eyes of your eyes, whenever I got to that part of it, exploration of humanity continuous for planetary advance. Okay, all of these things have to do with either interdimensional or time travel, if you really think about them. So, of course, they would want to explore their ancient past of humanity. Now, whether they're human or not, which I want to get to you with, but also for planetary advance, they came back in time, perhaps, or jumped in a dimension and now have entered this time from a different one, maybe the origin year of 8100, but also eyes of your eyes. This is the part where I was like, oh, well, that's them telling us that they're us from the future. They have our eyes. They're the same species, but not necessarily.
Maybe.
Like they're a tweaked.
Oh. You know what? That could be true. I don't know.
That's what I thought of.
I never seen that. I never thought of that. Okay.
Well, and the way, whenever we bring up interdimensional or time travel, we'll just say time travel I'll interplay that, but you and I know that there's probably something else going on here. But all three of those things, and it's interesting to the coordinates, because the coordinates could be either energetic or that those things actually lasted until the year 8100, which would be pretty damn cool if the pyramids of Giza last that long.
That's
who's to say?
8 millennium. Yeah, that's a lot.
Who's to say? Or the interdimensional or time travel part of it is what's so damn fascinating to me. And I know that you're a big fan of this as well. I have heard you report in interviews that it's not extraterrestrial. You just have this feeling about it. And
I never did. I never did have a feeling that it was extraterrestrial. I never used the word UFOs unless I was told to by film companies. But I never, even at the time, I mean, I purposely did not call it in my reports a UFO. I called it a craft of unknown origin. I mean, that's exactly what it is.
That's a more descriptive answer because it was identified. It was a craft, but you didn't know where it was from. So this is perfect. Absolutely. And I've talked about like why they fly, because I've heard that like, well, why isn't it just a time machine like the movie The Time Machine? Well, if you think about it, of course it would fly. Like, why the hell wouldn't you want it to do that? The other reason would be that, geologically the Earth is different and it changes over time, and especially over times in which you'd be time traveling. So you'd want to jump to a point where there was nothing else around, where you weren't going to get stuck inside a mountain or something like that. So that's maybe why they fly.
Okay. What's really important is this research that Gary, my co-author, had done, is that he found a code within the code, see? And that's what's part of it is going to be in this book. What do they call it every 26,000 years? What do they call that? The
precession of the equinoxes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But it's tied in right to the math, to the numbers exactly with that, okay? The 8100, the whole works. He's going to lay all this out. Plus, one of the things that's in the code is a fine structure content. You ever hear that? If this FSC, this fine structure content, usually is in, stuff in like galaxies and space and other phenomena.
The
and things
fine
like
structure
that.
Constant.
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
And anyway, within the code, there's a fine structure content that. Oops, sorry.
That's okay.
Oh, that means I got my hands going.
This is awesome.
That means that Gary had determined that on the December 26, 1980, the code, when it was written, that this fine structure constant is in there. And he goes into detail about it and tells how and the math behind it and makes sure that, he proves it. Okay. But the fine structure constant means that code, especially the one for Giza, goes over 13 different decimals. Okay. That's how finite it is, okay? So the chances of it ever being wrong are trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions to one. I mean, it's just impossible. And so this all reinforces the code, and it shows the bigger picture of the code. As a matter of fact, the Rendlesham Force incident is not about you, me, or anybody else. It's about the code. I mean, that's, for whatever the purpose and reason was for the contact, it was about the code. And there's just no doubt in my mind that he's going to, well, as a matter of fact, he cannot write one book about it, an additional book. He has 2 books envisioned. He's writing. I mean, I think he goes back and forth between the 2 books. But you got to talk to him about that. And, yeah, his research has been intense. And what I like is the fact that the math don't lie. The math does not lie. You're more welcome to it. Skeptics have left it alone because they initially try to do something with it. And he says, okay, here's why I came up with it. Prove differently. And they can't. It's just like that. But that just shows you that if the Rendlesham Force binary message wasn't enough to find out there's a code within a code. And the thing is, the information that for him to extract all this, and he can correct me, I could be a little bit wrong about stuff, but like Google Earth, the program for it didn't exist like till 2014 or something.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, and this thing measures stuff down to on a global scale to an inch. okay, with the binary code. It's to an inch. Inconceivable, but that code was only good on their Google Earth for that a 2-year period, okay? Then, of course, Google changed it again. And it's amazing. So there was a perishable time frame for it to be discovered, I guess. So.
Jeez.
I know, it's incredible.
The whole damn thing is incredible, and there are just so many fascinating points to this story. It's this account, what you've encountered, and even Connecticut professor, Ron Mallett. You are in communication with him as well, and even he says that he's a theoretical physicist, guys. This is also how he even speculates that this is completely theoretically possible, that if you were to send a message back from the future, you do it in binary code.
Yeah, that's, and I tell you what, that clip I showed you from what I think was taken up a storage to Connecticut, that was on Ancient Aliens show, okay, on one that I was in, okay, and I get a call. No, I wasn't in that one. I wasn't in a previous one, but the binary just came out, and like 6 months later, Ancient Alien does another show, and they got Dr. Mello in it, and so Kim Sharon calls me up from LA. She says, "Hey, you got to go and see this clip." She says, "You're gonna find it fascinating on a separate, totally different show and a viewpoint from Dr. Mellett on his theory on time travel." I said, "How long is that?" And she goes, "Oh, it's only like 3 minutes." She says the clip, so she sends it to me. I went, "Oh." So that would be the logical way for them to communicate from the future. Wow.
Yeah, which is fascinating, which again lends more to this idea that it's, intertempestrials. Now, I want to ask you a couple of questions here. Okay, so let me ask you this. I had a listener submit a question from a good friend of mine, Caitlin Romaine, who I'll go ahead and send her a shout out there. She wanted to know how this event changed your perspective on your identity.
Oh my God. Well, it changed completely the way I viewed everything, for sure. Before that night entering the forest, I didn't believe in any of this hooey. UFOs, extraterrestrials, anything like that. Okay, it's all science fiction. Okay, but I left that forest completely 180 degree, thinking something different. Okay, because I experienced it. I know what happened, and originally we were ensured that our names would never get out. Okay, in the reports. And career-wise, you can see why we were looking at least I was. Okay, I don't know about the other people. So that happened, but like I said, when we were talking about this paper that came out in 1983, I was still in England. I was still stationed in Bentwaters. So I was pissed when I seen that. So I started reading. I went, oh, I started reading. You know what I was reading in there? The cover story. I says, oh, they're published the cover story. I says, no big deal. That's the cover story they came up with. That's the one that was going around all the pubs and that. And I explain that in the book, how that came about and by who and who was tasked with it and who ordered it and all that stuff. It's in the Enigma book. And anyway, that's what this public release was. And so I was like, oh, okay. But it did cause problems because, I was told to treat it as top secret, which I always did until I found out it never happened, so I got an official thing from the Air Force that never happened, so nothing's classified.
It's like, oh, cool, because my memory said something else, but thank you for clarifying that it never happened.
Yeah, when I retired, our NDA, non-disclosure agreement, we had no secrets and targeting times and all that stuff. I says to the guy that was all processing me, I says, there's nothing on there about Bentwaters. He says, well, I don't know about it. I said, well, ask him if the thing in December 26, 1980, Beltwater is anything classified. And he did, and I'm out processing and retiring from the Air Force. And about 2 days later, because Hall told me to do this, okay? He says, challenge it. That's what he did. And so I challenged it, and he says, I get a call from the sergeant. He says, come up and finish the out process, and we got a reply for the NDA. I said, okay. So I get up there, and I said, okay, what did they say? And he says something really strange. He says, they says, nothing classified happened on that day, so therefore nothing is classified.
Perfect. That's perfect.
And I says, let me have a copy of that. Okay. He says, sure. So at that point in time, nothing classified. I don't know why they went plausible deniability or whatever. What they should have just said is, no, the incident is classified. That's all they have to say.
And that's all they'd have to say. And I think, though, that people want this stuff out. I think that there's a controlled opposition for this, and you are not that there are ways of getting this information out, and I think that it's drip-fed to the public in this way. And I think that's what disclosure is all about now, and we can go crazy on that. But it
feels... It's about control.
It is about control, and that's why it would have been just so much more easy just to suppress all of it. And that's what they did for everything. Pretty much, not a lot of military people can come out and talk about this, or they've been telling you exactly what they want you to know, which what I think has been happening. Like with the whole Roswell incident and all of that, it started way back then.
Yeah, well, you know what? What they got good at, what they got very good at is better on the containment.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Big time.
They got down to a science, the containment. They're so good at false flags nowadays that they do major operations. I just watch all these people just follow it left and right. I know. Wow. Well,
you're absolutely right. I wanted to come back to Caitlin's question real quick and just ask, did you have you answered it perfectly, but I had a follow-up. Did you have a religious affiliation or affinity beforehand, and did it change afterwards?
Yeah, well, I born, raised Catholic. Do I believe in God? Sure. Okay. Higher being, yes, all that stuff. Did it conflict? No. Why would human contact conflict with religion?
That's fair, and this is the stance that the Catholic Church specifically has taken. And quite a few years back, they started kind of talking about how maybe hell wasn't a thing, and it's not that big a deal. And then also contact from extraterrestrials, which of course now I believe NASA has a bunch of people talking about that right now. What that would do to the religious community, and it's one of those things. The Catholic Church, man, they got right out ahead and said, you know what? There's no reason why the Bible doesn't only apply to what goes on here on Earth, and that it doesn't include things that are outside of Earth, but they're totally possible, and we're all still God's children. And that's a very mature, I guess, approach to take on it. But it is interesting that it didn't shake or affect negatively your faith at all, or alter it really dramatically. That's interesting.
No, I imagine if I thought for a second that anything was extraterrestrial, I imagine that would have been a problem, I would think.
Well, this is what's so interesting, too, is that your mind went straight to not extraterrestrial specifically, and then kind of walked through the time travel or intertempestrial and interdimensional. I don't necessarily think time travel and interdimensional are different, and or could be viewed differently or expressed differently, which is why I kind of put them in the same category, or they're interchangeable. But it is interesting that you immediately just kind of knew this, or it had this innate feeling.
Actually, that's a very good point, Brandon. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
no.
That's the communication. There was so much, looking back, and there's so much communication being done that I didn't know was communication. For example, like what was in that binary message, I wasn't really surprised when I heard it for the first time because I thought it. So I knew about that. I thought that before. Well, I didn't think it. It's because it was communicated. I used to draw that stuff up myself, yeah. So there's
it's fascinating, dude. And it's part of that, right? Part of the download that you got, and people in the spiritual community talk about these all the time. And it's interesting to hear you also talk about it as a download in some of the interviews that I've seen with you.
It's just like well, was it manned? Well, was it manned? No, it was too small. This thing was this was a drone. You know, I didn't use the word drone then, but that's before we had them, right?
Yeah.
But there was no pilot in it. It wasn't manned, and they're like, "Oh, really? Well, how is that?" So it was under intelligent control. Halt's seen his stuff. It's under intelligent control. I mean, we knew that, but that was before we had the drones and all this stuff.
Yeah, the vernacular to describe it. I mean, for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's just, well, one of the theories that we have on there's a lot of theories. But you say, well, we can get into it. There's a lot of things about explaining about why people see things they see and that, and all kinds of things like that. We talked a little bit about that the other day.
Mm-hmm.
But another thing is that I'm not sure who came up with the theory. It was my co-author or it was Darren, another research team guy. He says, I don't think these grays and that are, he says, I don't think that's psychological, like you're saying, like where they can clone it or where they can, change the manipulation of, what you're thinking and seeing and that. So they might be real. I said, why would he say that? He says, what happens? He says, you ever stop and think your craft was unmanned? You ever stop and think maybe that the traveling, interdimensional travel coming back is so rough, so harsh that the human body, corporeal humans cannot stand it. They cannot do it because it would kill them. You ever stop and think about that? Maybe they developed hybrids or something that would survive this. I went, oh, so is that what you're saying? And I went, at first I thought he was crazy. You bringing it up. I went, I said, I got thinking about it. I said, that could very well explain a lot of people's sightings, of this, instead of being a hallucination,
Yeah, for sure. And then the grays are an interesting one. Now we're adding entities to the conversation. So the grays are an interesting one because there are some folks that speculate or kind of get the impression that they're more of automatons. They're more like hybrid robots or something like that. That's probably
where Darren came up with it too. I don't know. So
they could survive the radiation of space travel, and that's the thing, right? That's why we have a planet. Mars is the only planet occupied by robots, and it's ours. Allegedly, right? But don't get me started on all that. But what's interesting, too, about this is perhaps it was, air quotes, manned. You did see a manned craft. It's just maybe the people were this big. And maybe it was a huge craft for them, and they just didn't need to get out. And there's a projection on the inside. We just have no idea. But yes, a probe sent through time would make a lot of sense as well, some sort of drone apparatus, because that'd be a great way to go about it. Now, if you're talking just exploration or curiosity or like a task, for instance, that you needed something bipedal to manipulate, then yeah, that's where we probably see these entities. Now, something that I want to finish up on, and we've probably got to cap it here, man. We've already been doing this for 2 hours. This is great. I love this, and I could talk to you forever, but this will set us up for the next one as well. So one thing I wanted to ask you about as well, another good friend of mine who I was talking to, Mira Taylor from Moon and Ruin, so you guys go check her out, wanted to talk about, there's this incredible theory that she's got that now I've been thinking about since she talked about it. And we're going to have to end it on this one because it's so crazy and out there and awesome. So what if, and this is a big what if, we're not going to plant your flag on holding you to this concept if you either agree or just fancy it, right? But what if aliens and UFOs and all of that are nothing more than a product of the Earth or our psychosemantic thinking? Terrence McKenna has talked about this. Valet has talked about this as well. It's more of a psychosemantic thing when you're talking about any craft like that you basically come across an event or something that happens in time, perhaps, that your mind physically can't, no one's mind, by the way, can physically wrap their mind around. So it presents itself in a way that's crazy to you anyway. Technologically, it looks like a crazy technology, but really, it's a way to stair-step you or whoever is contacted by this or interacted with this into the idea of higher concepts, so that perhaps that you could be this. And maybe that's what being abducted is. Mira's theory on that is that they're actually being abducted and going within themselves, because you're all that's here. This goes very deep and very philosophical and very spiritual. But one of the ways that this can be viewed as well is perhaps going within yourself, because you're all that's here. It's one idea that a craft will appear to kind of buffer the ability to do that. And so it's a vehicle. You know, we travel in vehicles like this. We can comprehend something like that. We can't conceptualize it because we can't physically create craft like that, allegedly. But let's say that they present themselves in that way because now it's a part of you that is expressing something you needed to change the direction of your life. Like this changed you. We've already talked about that. It's opened you up to all sorts of new concepts, even with the trauma associated with it. So again, it's probably not you on a conscious level creating this stuff, but one idea would be that maybe this is a way for the inner world, which is all there is if you follow this theory, to kind of anthropomorphize out to a craft type of thing that then take you back inside yourself to perform some sort of surgery or some sort of enlightenment or something like that. It's a very far out idea, and I know there was a lot in there, but what do you think about that?
You know, that's the first time I heard such a interesting theory.
Mira's awesome, by the way. Her and I, when we talk on the phone, it's crazy.
No, it's very interesting, but it sort of ties in with what I already know so far with the CIA analysts and all that stuff that's covered in the book.
Yes.
It's part of the cloaking device that they have as a self-defense stuff, so they can go ahead and manipulate your subconscious, and you can. I sort of tend to agree with that. I don't know who's right. I mean, I tend to agree with the fact that it's just a cloaking device for the craft, a defense. You know, if you imagine if you can take a person's subconscious, and this is one of the things that was described in the Rockford Colloquium chapter, at a distance, and that's why they wanted to talk to us, because we had contact. At a distance, you know, if they could go ahead and manipulate that, whatever you subconsciously believe in, you see. For example, like fairies or little green men or anything, you know, you're gonna do all that stuff, and you're going to see that. And the reason that the CIA analysts wanted to talk to me during the Rendlesham Enigma or the Rockford Colloquium is that myself was one of the persons. Matter of fact, he said the only one that was still alive, which made me feel sort of bad. But yeah, I know. Out of 50 or something like that, I felt, well, wow, that's really scary. But I was the only one that actually had contact up there. And he says, "You've seen it for what it was." And I says, "Oh," he said, "that's why." And he went into other things about this. It's in the Colloquium chapter. And some of the things he went into, and one of the things he wanted to do, he wanted to run tests, DNA testing and stuff at Stanford and all this other stuff. And he said because he believes their team of 8 they have believe that when you have this unrestricted contact with this phenomena, it leaves a signature in your brain.
Yes.
That they can detect. Okay. And he went into a lot of detail about it. It's in the book. But it's also something that we can talk about later. I mean,
dude, so interesting. I mean,
so I don't discount anybody. I've learned that from the Rendlesham Forces incident. Do not discount anything. Always listen. Always try to process it and take a look at it later on. Look at it the next day with a cup of coffee, and because you start discounting stuff, they just it's part of the manipulation that the government does right now. I mean, they make it that way. They actually manipulate a lot with these false flag things. I use that term a lot, but they cover so much what's going on,
and it's been
in everyday life.
Years.
Yeah, and people just don't. They think it's normal. They think it's just life. They think everybody's honest. And one of the things that I know we gotta go, but about classification system, okay? They can't understand how you have black departments and stuff like that. It's beyond them. It's really easy with classified system, our system of classification. You have this is gonna be awful lengthy, I think, if I get into this. Oh man,
because you were cosmic clearance, so you were up there, man.
Yeah, I had top secret PSYOP, BI, cosmic, ATOMAL, NATO. I mean, that sounds like space stuff, though. Cosmic ATOMAL.
Yeah, hell yeah.
No, but it isn't. It's just, it means you had access to nuclear weapons and stuff like that.
Well, I tell you what, we are going to wrap it here, but this is going to set us up for the next conversation because, dude, you were welcome on any damn time. We have so much more to talk about for sure.
Well, see if run it, and if anybody's interested in the subject, we'll do another show. Oh,
we'll do another show. This is for me. If other people want to listen to it, cool. But I just put it out as a courtesy to everyone else. This is for me, and that's why we get.
Yeah, Brandon. I'll tell you what, Brandon, I like it. The only difference I'll do on the next one is I'll make sure I have a pot of coffee brewing because this is a nice conversation. And it's not an interview. It's really actually a nice discussion. I appreciate that.
It's a hang, man. And that's kind of my style, if you will. I'm not a fan of the question, answer. I think you and I covered a lot of ground here. This is probably one of the more comprehensive conversations about this.
I tell you what, you've asked questions that were never asked before, and I had a lot of questions asked. You had at least 3 for sure, or maybe 4. Yeah.
Well, we'll take it. And that's pretty much, again, part of the whole damn reason I started this show was to talk to guys like you. You were actually on a list that I had of quite a few people, but you were in that list of folks that made me want to start this show, to reach out to you, to ask you questions like that I hadn't heard you being asked before. That's the whole damn reason for this. So that's why I say it's for me. This is a very selfish thing that I do. It's just I put it out for everybody else if they want to listen to it too. And people are going to love this because, again, this is wonderful. So, Jim Penniston, my friend, dude, I can't thank you enough, and we have so much more to talk about. All the ways, of course, to find you will be linked down in the show notes, my friend. So, thank you again for your time. I can't tell you what this meant to me personally, but also how amazing this was. So, thank you.
Well, Brandon, I enjoyed it. I really did. And I can't say that during a lot of interviews and all these other things, this one seemed more like that we're sitting in the living room and just talking about it, and I appreciate that. You were very honest and good questions. Thank you.
Truly grateful, my friend.
Appreciate
honestly. And it's just curiosity. All the best indeed. We will talk
till the next time.
Man, oh man, what an awesome conversation. God, that was easily one of the most comprehensive breakdowns on this topic in particular that I've ever heard, and I'm just grateful to be here sitting with Jim. That was awesome. So all the ways to find him, guys, will be linked down in the show notes. The Rendlesham Enigma is his book. Go definitely check that thing out. Would recommend, 5 stars. And go out there and just check this stuff out. This is a fascinating case. It's one of the most well-documented. If you're over in that area, go check it out. Rendlesham Forest has a little mock, kind of like I think it's metal. Yeah, it's a metal craft that somebody built over there to put over the exact spot, similar to what Jim saw. And it's really, really interesting. So it's kind of a hierophany, right? It's one of these places from the sky where the gods came and they reached Earth, and we get to experience that. And you kind of get to go feel the magic around there. And it's an interesting location. So go down and check the show notes for Jim and his book. If you would like to expand your experience with us here on the show, you can do so at expandingrealitypodcast.com. That is where links to all of the socials, Rockfin for premium content, as well as merch, t-shirts and stuff are up there. We got some new shirts up. Make sure you go check that out. Some really cool artists doing some awesome stuff for us. So go check that out for show. And other than that, guys, go out into this beautiful world. I mean, go check that book out for sure. Make sure you check this case out. Even on your own, just research it. It's fascinating. If you're into UFOs at all, if you're into anything mysterious, this is a really, really good one to kind of bake your noodle on. You know what I mean? Kind of rock the old noodle on there. So go out into this beautiful place, whatever the hell this thing is, and you'll pick up a piece of litter, buy somebody in line around you a coffee or a meal, something like that. Open doors, smile at folks, be nice to every human, animal, entity, lizard person that you come across. Go out into this beautiful place, and y'all just be good to one another. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time.